We are going to be travelling back in time to the 1940s during World War II, where life was a lot different to what we are used to now in 2021. From washing clothes by hand, to food rationing, limited water usage, blacking out the windows, making your own dripping, and waking in the early hours of the morning to the frightening sound of an air raid siren. This is the 1940s, and we will be living like this for 48 hours. It was a bit of a chilly morning on Monday, but I got up and headed to the kitchen to prepare James and I some breakfast. For the next 48 hours, I followed the UK's rationing guide, which meant that we were only allowed 2 tea bags per person. And this was quite a dramatic rationing for the British, since they usually had 10 tea bags each day. We had a nice and easy breakfast on Monday, which included Weet Bix topped with tinned peaches, a glass of orange juice, and a pot of tea. During World War II, fresh fruit was never rationed, but it wasn't always available, which meant canned and preserved fruit was used more often because it could last in the cupboard. Sugar was rationed to 8 ounces or 226 grams per adult each week, which meant in some desserts and foods, other sweet syrups were sometimes used, like honey, maple syrup, and corn syrup. I'm used to enjoying avocado on toast, and I love savoury breakfasts. This wasn't necessarily my cup of tea, having Weet Bix, and they were kind of dry having it with just sugar and some peaches on top. I couldn't top it with banana or blueberries or anything fancy like that. And of course, we're doing the washing by hand since there were no dishwashers either. After the kitchen was cleaned from breakfast, I headed off to my bedroom to make the bed and get myself ready for the day. Housewives in the 1940s ensured that all clothing was carefully ironed before being worn. And now it was time for me to change out of my nice warm dressing gown into something more work appropriate for the day. But the look is not complete without some red lipstick. Red lipstick was often worn during the wartime to symbolize victory and optimism. Males between the ages of 18 and 41 were conscripted for service in the war. Not all men within this age range went, as some were medically unfit and others were exempt as they had jobs in important industries such as baking, medicine, farming, and engineering. I couldn't imagine waving goodbye to James and seeing him off to war and the possibility of him not returning. It's an absolutely terrible thought, and my heart goes out to all of those women who had to say goodbye to their sons and husbands. Since I had James at home, we were able to work together and put up the chicken fence. We bought a chicken house as well and put that together and put it on the little stilts in the chook pen, ready for our chickens to arrive that evening. Since we're getting chickens, we're going to be getting some eggs really soon, so we're splurging and having our 1 egg ration, and I'm going to be beating this up, putting a little hole in the bread, and this is going to be toad in the hole or egg in the nest. And I'll be mixing this up so that 1 egg can spread across 2 pieces of bread. Later on this afternoon, we're going to be blacking out our windows to make sure that no light can escape through when we turn on the lights at night. So I've got some fabric here that we're going to be using for that, and we'll just stick that up, and I'll show you the process later on. James and I enjoyed our lunch outside, and let me tell you, it was delicious. You really can't go wrong with toad in a hole. It's just so good every time. I wanted to try my hand at some homemade bread, so after lunch, I got out my ingredients and started to measure my flour and sift it all together. And it was at this point that I realized that I forgot to buy yeast. so I couldn't make my bread that I was so excited to make. Besides the bread situation, we were over the moon with our 2 new chickens. We kept going outside to check on them and make sure that they were at home and had enough seed and water. Maple and Maud enjoying their food. Babe, tell me who's Maud and who's Maple?
So, Maud has her back to us.
Yeah.
Because she's a bit cranky.
Yeah.
So that's Maud, because she's giving us this stinky eye. Whereas Mabel is all red. And
Yeah.
she's happy, so that's Mabel. Mabel's kind of like a bouncier name than Maud, you know?
And by this time, it was almost dinner. We'd spent pretty much the whole day outside with the chickens and making sure they were at home and that they had the fence up and their little hutch to stay in at night. It was time for a cup of tea. Tea bags were often reused and put aside to make a tea essence, which was just a really weak tea. Before I started the dinner preparations, I got out the carpet sweeper and did a once-over of the house. Since I'd been outside all day, I'd neglected the inside chores. Monday night's dinner was a shepherd's pie with beautiful fresh veggies from the local grocery store. Just like fruit, vegetables were never rationed during the wartime, but they weren't always readily available. So the government encouraged families to create their own vegetable gardens in their backyard, so they were always able to have a constant supply of fruit and vegetables. I sauteed the onion and then put in the chopped vegetables of mushrooms, celery, capsicum, carrot and zucchini. I then added some mixed herbs and some garlic to the mix. For the mash for the top of the shepherd's pie, I boiled some white potato, sweet potato, parsnip and turnip. The recipe called to flavour the shepherd's pie with Marmite, which is something that I'd never used before in cooking, and it turned out unexpectedly really nice. Because meat was rationed during World War II, people could only have a small amount of meat each week, so they got creative with meals and started to use more legumes and beans than they ever would have. So for this shepherd's pie, instead of using lamb mince, I'm using lentils, and it turned out so nice. While dinner was cooking in the oven, I got a head start and did all of the washing, so I didn't have much to do after dinner. So James and I set up the chicken pen outside today because we got our chickens. They arrived this evening and their names are Mabel and Maud. In the wartime, a lot of families got chickens or rabbits or some sort of animal that they could either have the byproduct from or eat the animal. Because of meat and egg rationing, it was much easier to have those foods and livestock if you had the space for it in your backyard. And I'm gonna black out the windows tonight. They would have a warden that would come around and make sure that your windows were blacked out. So if you didn't do that before it got dark, you would actually be fined. So we would be fined if this was the deadline and we had to have the blackout windows up. We don't have the blackout windows up. It was just a totally different time that they lived in. So it's been really cool to appreciate that. What everyone went through and how little food they had. It really makes you appreciate food and even the small amount of food that you do have to enjoy that and make it into something that tastes good. Dinner was absolutely delicious. We had our lentil shepherd's pie with a side of green beans. It was really filling and we both enjoyed it so much, and I'll definitely be making it in the future. We had plenty of shepherd's pie left over, so I could reuse that again for a few more meals. After washing the dishes from dinner, I got out the blackout material and stuck that to the window. When you put up your blackout material, cardboard, or painted your windows in black paint, you had to make sure that there was no crack of light that could escape. It had to be pitch black. 1 hour of radio was broadcast every day for families to listen to, updating civilians on the wartime effort and encouraging citizens to help out with wartime jobs.
Over the CBS network, and the Prime Minister said that I have to tell you that we are now at war with Germany. We shall bring you further news as quickly as we have it, and we suggest that you keep tuned to your Columbia station.
I washed up after dinner. We've listened to some radio that they would have broadcasted in the 1940s during the war, and now I'm going to take a bath before I go to bed. There was water rationing, which means that you could only have 5 inches or 12 centimeters depth of water. Look how short that is. That is terrible. And bath water was often reused. When the water shortages were really extreme, you had to reuse that bath water for your whole family, which means, you know, the kids in the bath first and then the adults in after. James and I are not going to be sharing the bath water. We'll run a 5-inch bath each. That's just crazy to think that a whole family had to share bath water and you only got 5 inches. That's not even enough to cover you. You'd just be in the bath freezing, especially during winter. So let's see, I'm gonna pencil on the tub where I need to stop the water line and we'll see how the bath is. All right, I've drawn a line to where 5 inches is. I mean, that's not from the center of the tub, I don't think. It's just from the edge. So 5 inches there, let's fill it up and see how full it gets. Before, during and after World War II, cold cream never left a woman's vanity. It was used for removing makeup, cleansing the face, and moisturizing. Soap rationing was introduced in 1942. Imperial leather was advertised as lasting a long time, so it was very popular during the war. I've had my bath now. I've just filled up James's bath, and I really don't think he's gonna like it. I think he's gonna hate it. I was alright at the beginning, but then the water started to cool down and then my whole body was cold because it was out of the water. So I can't imagine how James is gonna feel because I'm tiny and the water wasn't even covering me. So we'll see what he thinks. Okay, I'll go get him. How much more would you usually fill that? I've drawn the line. Can you see? It's over there.
It's not as bad as I was expecting. I was expecting it to be really bad.
Yeah, me too. It wasn't as bad as I thought either.
Yeah, but it's definitely...
It gets cold fast though.
I was expecting it to be like
After a relaxing bath, I hopped into bed and read a book. On Tuesday morning, I woke to a beautiful day outside with blue skies and the sun shining through. I went out into the backyard to let the chickens out, and Mabel cautiously walked down her little ramp. Yay! Good job, Mabel! Followed by Maud, who was just as cautious. And I fed them some scraps from the compost for their breakfast. After feeding the chickens, I got started on making some breakfast. I cooked some bacon as that was part of breakfast, but also I was cooking the bacon specifically for dripping. Because butter was rationed, dripping was used instead and put on bread and any way that you would usually use butter. Since I had leftover shepherd's pie in the fridge, I decided to use that and make up a bubble and squeak to go with breakfast. I filled up the teapot with 1 used tea bag, so it was a very mild tea. I poured off the dripping into a bowl and put that in the fridge to set to use for later on. Tuesday's breakfast was really nice. I much preferred this over Monday's dry Weet-Bix. I love savoury breakfasts, and it was actually really nice having that bubble and squeak of the shepherd's pie from the night before. It really made it in combination with the baked beans. My outfit for the day was one of the first dresses that I've made from a 1940s pattern. And of course I had my hair curled from the day before, so I just brushed those curls out so I was ready for the day ahead. And I'm all ready for the day, but I can't forget my red lipstick. Today's washing day, and yellow sunlight soap or velvet soap was commonly used during the wartime. A wringer washer was used in the 1940s to do the weekly wash. But since I don't have one, and I don't want to use my modern washing machine, I'm going to be doing it by hand with a washboard and grating the soap into the bucket. So let's do this. I'm excited to do my first load of washing all by hand. Something that I really liked about doing the washing by hand instead of with a modern washing machine is I was able to sit outside and soak in the sun and have the breeze flowing through my hair and seeing our cute chickens pecking around in the grass. It was just really, really nice. After giving the clothes a thorough washing with soap, I then emptied that water and then put fresh water in for the rinse. And then I had to wring each piece individually since I don't have a wringer or some sort of wringer system that they would have had in the 1940s. Alright, I've just done the washing. That took me about an hour and then I just fed the chickens. I really liked using the washboard. I think it was really fun. I think it's just a novelty at the moment, like, oh, washboard. And I really enjoyed scrubbing the clothes on it and I felt like I really gave them a good clean. I mean, obviously a washing machine does that job for you and does the cleaning, but it felt like I really cleaned the clothes very well. But yes, it took me an hour, so not very time efficient, and that was only one load of washing, and that was like a pretty small load what's on the line at the moment, so not even that many clothes. And once I washed them all, I had to then change the water and rinse them all as well. And then even still, you can see when I hang them on the line, I was wringing out water from them even then. It's a cold wintry day in Melbourne, so it's probably not going to dry, which means I'll just have to hang them up in front of the fire, I guess, so they can dry. You'd then iron your clothes while they're still a little bit damp and then hang them up in your wardrobe. And we're very much loving Maud and Mabel. They're lovely. We love them so much. Them in their cute little chicken house. We're gonna paint it and make it really nice. I'm gonna go make some lunch for James and I, and then we're gonna get into making the victory garden. So I'm making mock brains. Sounds really weird, but I wanted to try it out because it doesn't include any meat in it, and I thought it would be interesting to see what the texture's like and what it tastes like. Because I mean, I don't think many people eat brains now. It sounds really gross. And I couldn't imagine many people liking it now, but it was a big thing back in the 1940s and the 30s, and they obviously missed it enough to make a recipe called mock brains out of it. So in this recipe, you'll need a cup of leftover porridge, a tablespoon of self-raising flour, a small onion, 1 egg, and a large pinch of thyme, and salt and pepper to season. So let's make this and see how it tastes. Whenever I'm in the kitchen cooking, I can't help myself. I always have a record playing and I just get carried away and dance. Lunch was so delicious. I absolutely did not expect the mock brains to taste nice. I don't know what I thought they would taste like, but they really outdid my expectations. They were delicious. I highly recommend making them. And after that delicious lunch, I decided to get back in the kitchen and of course do some dancing and make some scones. Usually you would have enough sugar and butter to make some sort of sweets once a week. So I plan to make scones as my once a week treat. Once the scones came out of the oven, I felt so disappointed. They were so thin and some of them were a little bit burnt as well. Because I followed a wartime recipe, there wasn't a lot of butter. I think I left them in the oven for too long, so they were a bit dry and thin. They didn't raise how I wanted them to, but they were actually okay when you added a little bit of butter and jam, and even a bit of cream would help with the texture. Families were encouraged to start victory gardens during World War II, as fresh fruit and vegetables weren't always available. So we wanted to try our hand out in making our own little victory garden. Since we don't actually have anything in the way of a vegetable garden in our yard, we got our seed packets and we started our little garden, and we planted lettuce and spring onions to start it off. By the time I brought in the clothes that evening, they were completely dry, which I was so surprised about considering how much water I was wringing out of them as I was hanging them on the line. Tuesday night's dinner was 1940s style everything in stew. It's literally what the title says. Anything that you have on hand, vegetables that need to be used up, everything goes in. And the stew is usually paired with some sort of minced meat. Rationing during World War II wasn't just food, it was also electricity. If you weren't in a room, you didn't need the light on. So you'd go through the house and make sure that all the power was off, switches were off if you weren't using them. You would only keep the light on in the room that you were in. The everything in stew was absolutely delicious. It was really hearty and warm and lovely on a wintry night. James also used the dripping that I'd made earlier that morning on his bread to go with his stew, and he really enjoyed it. He said that there were hints of bacon each time he dipped it into the stew. After dinner, I listened to the wartime radio and I got out some clothes that needed mending. During World War II, women were encouraged to mend their clothes instead of purchasing new clothes. Along with food, electricity and water, clothes were also rationed along with many other things. Bathing was only done once a week, so I changed into my pajamas, cleansed my face and hopped into bed. There is something so nice and refreshing about putting cold cream on your face and massaging that in and then removing it with a hot washcloth. I gave my hair a good brush out, The 1940s beauty advice suggests 100 strokes a day ensures your hair is healthy and shiny. And then after a long day of hard work, I was finally ready for bed. But then I was woken in the early hours of the morning to the frightening sound of an air raid siren.
Take shelter immediately. You still have 18 minutes. Stay on the cover until the all clear is sounded. This is most important. Please take shelter now.
No time now for asking what to do, where to go. The hour of trial is upon us.
The air raid siren could be sounded in the day or in the middle of the night. And if it was sounded at night, you had to be sure when leaving your house that no light could be seen from above. There were many unfortunate incidences where people fell down the stairs on their way out to their Anderson shelter or to seek cover. After spending 48 hours living in 1940s wartime, I cannot even begin to understand how difficult life was for people. I was only able to skim the surface by incorporating rationing and limiting water and electricity. There are people all over the world who have had to live through war, and it is amazing how resilient they were, and even with the hardships they went through, they came out the other side and went on with their lives. I have so much respect and appreciation for the women and men of the 1940s after this 48-hour experiment. I really enjoyed this insight into what life might have been like during wartime, and I hope you enjoyed it too. And I'll see you next week for another video on Sunday. Thanks for watching. Bye!
It needs to be nice and moist.